Has your child started tantruming out of nowhere? My name's Jodie Thornton, and I want to talk to you about what we can do in these stages where your child is all of a sudden just tantruming a lot. The very first thing we want to do is introduce some preemptive regulation. So this is really helping your child improve their baseline regulation so that we've got a little bit more time between when something happens that might send them into a tantrum and them getting overwhelmed. It also helps them to have, hopefully, a little bit less intense tantrums, a little bit less duration of the tantrums, and hopefully a little bit less in the frequency of tantrums, right? What we're doing here is, if you imagine that your child's ability to cope is like a bucket, and when the bucket fills up, when it overflows, that sends them into dysregulation. That's when they're overwhelmed and they're going to end up tantruming. What goes in the bucket? Like, what is that? That is unprocessed emotions. So if you have an emotion that you know what to do with, then it will not overwhelm you and it doesn't need to go anywhere. You notice your emotion, you recognize what it's telling you about what you need, and then you do something about it, then that's fine. The emotion dissipates. When we don't know what to do with our feelings, that's when they build up and then eventually dysregulate us. One of the things that we can do when we don't know why all of a sudden your child's tantruming, what we can do is have them empty their bucket more frequently, right? And by emptying the bucket more frequently, that then gives them a little bit more capacity to deal with those unprocessed emotions without getting overwhelmed. How do we do that? We're looking for two types of activities. The first type of activity is something that gets them into a meditative or a flow state, like a very relaxed state. If your child will meditate, choose that. That is definitely what we're aiming for, is that meditative state. Most children won't meditate, but I always mention it because there are some children who will meditate, even small ones, and so if that will work for your child, I want you to choose that. But if you're in the vast majority of us whose children do not meditate, then we're just looking for something that helps them to relax. So that could be anything from drawing, painting, kids yoga, cuddles, light strokes on their forehead, like anything that helps their body to relax. I'd also say it's a good idea to ask your child what makes them feel more relaxed, because you can sometimes be surprised about what they come up with, and that can give you a really great clue on something that you can do realistically day in, day out. The second type of activity we're looking for is something that makes them laugh. So anything from silly faces, surprises, being cheeky, funny words, like anything at all that makes them laugh, with one exception, which is tickling. Tickling activates both our fun receptors but also our fear receptors, and so because of that, if we're trying to improve your child's baseline regulation, tickling is not going to be helpful there. So once you've got some activities, like if you can have a variety of activities in each category, that would be awesome. But at least if you've got one of each, what we want to be doing is doing one of each of those categories every day if you can. Now, if it's impossible for you to do that every day, I don't want you to push past what's realistic for you, because if it makes you dysregulated because of the pressure to be able to find the time or the pressure to make it happen, then your dysregulation will increase their dysregulation, right? So that's counterproductive. So what we want to do is just as often as is realistic for you. That's once every second day, if it's certain days of the week when you're not working, or if it's once a week or even once a fortnight. Anything you can do is helpful. So if we just take what's realistic. Now, what those two different types of activities do is they send different types of signals to our nervous system to say that we're safe and everything's going to be okay. So that's why we want to do those things. And so it basically empties the bucket of unprocessed feelings and allows them to be have that little bit more distance between something that upsets them and something that overwhelms them. And so hopefully that will reduce the emotional load on you and reduce the emotional load on them, which helps us to really figure out, okay, what's going on, and then what do we need to do to actually prevent all of this dysregulation from happening all the time. So in that step, what we're looking for is there something that has caused this spate of tantrums? If we can't figure it out, that's okay. We can do some other things to help. But if we can figure out what might have caused this state of tantrums, then it can help us to give us clues about what your child needs in order to get back to a state where they're not needing to tantrum so often. So one thing to think about is what was happening at around the time the tantrum started. So we're looking for anything like changing rooms at daycare, going on holidays, reset after the Christmas period, moving house, a change in your relationship, so either a breakup or a new partner in your relationship, a new sibling, or the baby was previously kind of inanimate like a doll, but now the baby's mobile, so now it's a whole different ball game. Like that can be something that's dysregulating for your child. Like the process of adjusting can be dysregulating for your child. We're looking for anything at all that can kind of give us clues, and then we can look for, okay, so what would that mean? Well, if we're moving house, well, that's a lot of change. So how can we get our child some more predictability? So that might be, we might really double down on routine. We also might bring up some of the validation around it is really hard. Everything's different because we've moved, right? Really validating those feelings, and that can help them through. And so for each of those examples, you're looking for like what might it have been, and that will give us some clues about what they would need in order to not have so many unprocessed emotions so they don't end up dysregulated. There's one other example I'd like to bring up, which is cognitive developmental stages. So between the ages of 1 and 6, at every half birthday, your child will be going through a big stage of growth in their brain, which means that they have a very big shift cognitively, which can be overwhelming for them. So unscientific way of explaining it is that your child's brain is growing. The new parts of the brain need to connect to the old parts of the brain. In order to make those connections happen, the old parts of the brain, the connections between the old parts of the brain break, and then it kind of feels like all bets are off because they are, right? Very unscientific explanation. But what we're looking at here is like new skills or new abilities or new awarenesses that your child has to learn how to understand and integrate. And as they're in that learning process, it feels intense for them, and so that can bring that up. So between the ages of 1 and 6, it's the half birthdays, and from 7 through the teenage years, it's every odd birthday. So you'll see them go into a period of like what they call disequilibrium, and then after a while they adjust to this new stage and they come back into a regular stage. So all of those things could cause a big spate of tantrums. Now, if you found what might be the cause, and you can then figure out how do we get those underlying needs met so that they don't have the unprocessed emotions, we want to get started on that as soon as you can figure out what those things might be. In the meantime, whether you are not sure what the cause has been, or you are pretty sure what the cause is and you're in the process of adjusting so that they're getting their underlying needs met and then they don't have these unprocessed emotions, what we want to be doing is when they tantrum, stay with them as much as you can. So long as being with them doesn't dysregulate you to the point where you're reactive, I want you to stay with your child. How close you need to be to your child will depend on your child, and sometimes even tantrum to tantrum. So every kid will have their own like requirement of personal space when they're overwhelmed. One of mine, pretty sure she would occupy the same space as my skin if she could when she's dysregulated, and the other one needs more space between us. We need about 1.5 meters of space between us. Your child will have like a default set, and then in each tantrum you want to check how close can I be where it's clear that I'm here to help, but I'm not so close that my presence is dysregulating you. And so that's what we want to do for space, and stay with them as long as you can. even if you're not sure how to calm them down, I want you to stay with them as much as you can. If you need to leave because either you're dysregulated or there's a time pressure, like you have to go to work or the dinner's going to burn, make sure you say, I can see you're upset, but I need to go because I'm feeling upset, or I need to go because the dinner's going to burn if I don't go and stir it now, right? Just giving them the message that it's not their feelings that are the problem. There's something that there's like a competing priority that we need to attend to, right? So then, when they are not tantruming, make sure you're recharging, because this is quite draining while you get through this. And so we want to make sure that you're doing the things that help you to get back to grounded and help you get back to settled. And we want to find as many different types of activities, because sometimes the things that are the best for you are not realistic or practical in the moment. So we want to find what are the things that you can do to help yourself really take an exhale and get through this, because it can be an ongoing, like it can take a while for us to get through this. Now, then the last thing I would say is we actually want to build your skills at being able to help your child regulate. So we want to be able to build your skills to be able to use your body language, your tone of voice, and your word choice to help your child actually get regulated. In that process, a step-by-step process, you can access that in my webinar, Supporting Kids Through Tantrums. In this, we're talking about the step-by-step. So I've already talked about getting to the right physical space with your child, but in that webinar, it'll take you through how to help your child go from overwhelmed into regulated. So you can talk about what is the underlying issue and how do we solve that underlying problem so that your child isn't getting upset. Ultimately, what we want to get to in the long term, we want your child to be able to express themselves before they get overwhelmed, right? And then the two of you work together as a team to figure out a solution that works for both of you and anyone else that's involved, right? So that's where we want to get to. I do want to say, we want to make sure that we're not expecting that tantrums will stay for a long period of time. Yes, there are ages where tantrums can be more intense. A lot of people talk about, terrible twos or three-nagers, four-nados. I think I've heard, ways that we express for each age. Different ages can hit different kids harder or softer, and so it can be more challenging for different kids at different ages. But just because your child is at an age where there's typically more tantrums does not mean that this needs to stay the case for a long time. What we want to see is that your ability to help your child regulate means that the tantrums are less intense and they don't go as long. We want to see that, yes, day-to-day might be different, and yes, there might be challenging days, so it's not necessarily a straight line, but we want to see the trajectory of how intense your child's tantrums are and how long they last. We want to see that becoming down and down and down. We want to see that your ability to help your child regulate is improving over time. We also want to see that your child's ability to recognize their feelings and articulate their feelings before they get overwhelmed is increasing. And as that happens, we see the number of tantrums reduce. And that's something that is reasonable to see at 2, at 3, at 4. They can be very young. If your child's tantruming under 2 years of age, we would be more focused on you regulating. There are some things we can do about emotional awareness there, but one is much harder because of they have a less ability to express their emotions, right? The upside is there's fewer things that they might be upset about, so that can be easier for us to figure it out, but it's more on us to be helping them to regulate. Once your child hits 2, they're getting to the stage where they can express the level of complexity of feelings that they're having is matches their level of ability to express themselves, right? So we want to be getting to the place where they can recognize the feelings and articulate themselves before they get overwhelmed. That webinar will take you through the steps of what to do with your child when they're overwhelmed, as well as how to talk about the feelings and the underlying needs in a way that builds their emotional awareness up and builds their skills to be able to articulate themselves before they get overwhelmed. You can grab that webinar at jodithornton.com/tantrums. I hope this has been so helpful, and please do reach out if you have any questions at all.